Springsteen, Deliver Me From Nowhere is now streaming on Hulu and Hulu on Disney+.
Trying to find some real in all the noise.
You always do.
The artist you know, the story you don't. See Golden Globes nominee Jeremy Allen White as Bruce Springsteen. Critics are saying it's a career-defining performance.
Let's burn this place down, Johnny.
Springsteen, Deliver Me From Nowhere, now streaming on Hulu and Hulu on Disney+. Rated PG-13.
Welcome back to the Murder Diaries. I'm Paige.
And I'm Natalie.
Make sure if you want to listen ad-free, you head over to patreon.com/murderdiariespod. And you can also catch us on YouTube now.
The case we have for you today has been in and out of the news since 1999. There's a lot of conversation surrounding this case right now. So why don't we start at the beginning?
Used to think it's in my head, but I'm walking with the dead.
January the 13th, 1999. It started like any other day for high school student Hae Min Lee. She got out of bed, ate her breakfast, and drove the short distance to Woodlawn High School near Baltimore in Maryland. Whilst most days Hae had an after-school activity like lacrosse or hockey, on this particular Wednesday, she was scheduled to pick up her young cousin from daycare around 3:15. When Hae left her school campus that afternoon, she was her usual upbeat and joyful self as she waved goodbye to friends and headed toward her car. And that was the last time Hae would ever be seen alive again. Hae Min Lee was born in South Korea on October 15th, 1980. She emigrated to the United States with her mother and younger brother in 1992. They lived with Hae's maternal grandparents. Hae picked up English pretty quickly and adapted to life in the United States. Her friends remember Hae as a bright, humorous young girl. She was super smart and supposed to graduate the year she was killed. She dreamed of being an optician and worked at a local optometrist after school, managing part-time work and studies in between playing varsity-level hockey and lacrosse, and managing the men's wrestling team at her school. On top of all of that, she was also a member of the school's ecology club and Students Against Destructive Decisions. Close friends have often recalled her quirky sense of humor, specifically talking about how she intentionally sang songs off-key and made lame Teletubby jokes in order to elicit a smile from her audience, while coaches and teachers pointing out her smile and joyful approach of life. They all remembered her love of the Dallas Cowboys, not because of their sporting achievements, but because of their team colors, blue and silver, which were her favorite colors ever. Hae had a way of charming whomever she came into contact with. She was helpful and considerate of others, and would be the first to offer support to someone in need. In the wake of her murder, her parents released a single statement in honor of their daughter in which they said, quote, "She stood up for what was right, regardless of popular opinion." Now, when Hae failed to show up at the daycare to collect her cousin that Wednesday afternoon, her family immediately knew something was wrong. Hae was a dependable person who wouldn't skip out on her responsibilities, especially when it came to family. And there's no way she wouldn't have answered the tons of calls her family made as they tried to get in touch with her. Just 2 hours after Hae failed to turn up, her mother called the police to notify them that she was missing, and officers began to try and track her down. They called all of her friends, her family, her boyfriend, and even her ex-boyfriend. But no one had seen Hae since school finished that afternoon. That evening, with no sign of Hae, investigators began a dog-led search starting at Woodlawn High School, the last place anyone recalled seeing Hae. But the search turned up no sign of her. So her family printed posters and carried out their own searches in the many parks and localities around the school. Meanwhile, police continued to talk to her friends and classmates in hopes of finding any piece of information that could indicate where she was. But there was no new information and no sign of Hae or that Nissan Sentra that she drove to and from school each and every day. As the hours turned into days and the days turned into weeks, her family's hope began to fade that they would ever see her bright, smiling face ever again. And unfortunately, they were right, because On February 9th, 1999, their worst nightmare became their reality. Just under 1 month since Hae had gone missing, a man by the name of Alonzo Sellers called the police to report he had found a body at Lincoln Park in Baltimore. When police arrived, they confirmed that the body was that of a young female who was buried in just 1 foot of dirt not far from the school where she was last seen. The remains were quickly identified as the body of Hae Min Lee. While her body was removed for autopsy, the police were given the solemn task of informing her family that she had at last been found. But in the years since Hae's murder, it's not the circumstances of her death which have garnered the most attention. Instead, it's the circumstances of the investigation, the trial, conviction, and subsequent release of her alleged killer which have captured the interest of the public. On February 12th, while Hae's remains underwent an autopsy to determine the cause of death, the police received an anonymous phone call telling them to look more closely at her ex-boyfriend and classmate, Adnan Syed. Within days of the tip-off, the police had requested the cell phone records of Adnan, and they began to look more closely at the circumstances of their relationship and how that relationship ended. Both Hae and Adnan were from conservative backgrounds, Hae from Korea and Adnan from Pakistan. They met as classmates and bonded over their shared love of sports. Like Hae, Adnan was similarly interested in both academics and athletics, achieving excellent grades and playing on the football team. While they dated for a few months, they agreed that their relationship wasn't going to be accepted by their family, so they kept it secret, meeting out of sight of either family. And not long before Hae disappeared, she broke up with Adnan. It's reportedly due to her growing frustration over not being able to publicly announce their relationship. Hae moved on from Adnan after they separated and began dating a coworker from the optician's store named Dawn. Police interviewed friends of Hae's and Adnan's to understand if that separation was motive for murder. It was during these interviews that they spoke with a friend of Adnan's named Jay Wilds. Jay's recollection of events around the time of Hae's murder and up to the discovery of her body became the bombshell evidence, which secured an arrest warrant for Adnan Syed. Here's what Jay told police. He said that on the day of Hae's disappearance, Adnan had told him he intended to kill Hae. He claimed that Adnan had admitted to killing her, and he asked for Jay's help in disposing of her body. He then went on to tell investigators that Adnan had asked him to meet at the local Best Buy parking lot where Adnan arrived in Hae's car. Her body was in the trunk. Together, they buried her body in the shallow grave and drove her car to a residential area where they abandoned it. Seemingly in support of his story, Jay later took police to Hae's Nissan Sentra, which was parked exactly where he had described it would be. A thorough examination of her vehicle led police to believe the Nissan Sentra was where Hae had been murdered. There was blood in the car, and on the front seat, there was a striped shirt with a blood stain. In the back seat were her cleats, backpack, and a road map. No foreign DNA was detected in her vehicle, though an unidentified fingerprint was pulled from the rearview mirror. The police then compared Adnan's cell tower records with Jay's testimony about his involvement and movements on the day of Hae's disappearance. And they were confident the records corroborated Jay's version of events and put Adnan squarely in the frame for Hae's murder. Adnan was brought in for questioning and confronted with Jay's testimony. He immediately denied any involvement and reiterated that he had last seen Hae at school around 1:30 p.m. on the day of her disappearance. He also claimed that after seeing Hae, he went to the Woodlawn Public Library with a friend, Asia McLean. He claimed that this gave him a solid alibi and therefore excluded him from any possibility of being involved in her murder. Meanwhile, Hae's autopsy confirmed her cause of death was via manual strangulation. She was found fully clothed, though her jacket was undone and her breasts were exposed. She had sustained blunt force injuries to the back of her head, and no foreign DNA was collected from Hae's remains. Then on February 28th, 15 days after Hae's disappearance, Adnan Syed was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. Prosecutors believed that they had a strong case based on the evidence that they had acquired against him, despite it all being circumstantial. Remember, there's no DNA evidence in this case so far. So the entirety of the case against Adnan was as follows. The testimony of Adnan's friend Jay, which claimed Adnan had confessed. The cell phone tower data, which indicated Adnan could have been in the locations Jay had suggested in his statement. And the remains of Hae, who had been strangled to death, but there was no DNA evidence collected. Additionally, the fingerprint on the rearview mirror of her Nissan Sentra wasn't a match for Adnan. And that's all they had. Adnan's family hired an attorney by the name of Cristina Gutierrez to defend him in his December 1999 trial. But just 3 days after that trial started, it was declared a mistrial after jurors heard a sidebar conversation between Adnan's lawyer and the judge, which would have compromised the integrity of the jury's findings. A month later, a second trial began and lasted 6 weeks. But if you listen to Serial, you know that Adnan's defense was flawed from the outset. Firstly, there was the testimony of Jay, the star witness. During his 2 recorded interviews with police and subsequent statements, his story had changed and changed. The details of those changes painted a vastly different picture of events. Oddly, his first version of the story was that Adnan had shown up at his house with Hae's body in the trunk of her car. In the second version, though, he told an officer he saw the body on Franklin Town Road. And then in the third, he told investigators Adnan had asked to meet at the Best Buy car park. Had his first or second version of events been true, then the cell phone tower records wouldn't have backed up his claims. But once he changed his story to the pair meeting at the Best Buy parking lot, all of a sudden the cell tower records were a match. And that's the story they stuck with. There's other inconsistencies in Jay's statements as well. Once he told investigators that Hae was killed in her car in the Best Buy parking lot, but in another statement, he said it was at a local state park. Then in comments to a friend, he said it happened in the library parking lot. Shockingly, when questioned on the stand about these inconsistencies in his statements, he admitted he was a liar who was just trying to cover his own crimes as a petty drug dealer. Yet, the prosecution painted his testimony as key evidence against Adnan. As if Jay's multiple stories wasn't a big enough mess, remember the alibi witness Asia McClain, whom Adnan had claimed to have been with at the library during Hae's murder? Well, Cristina Gutierrez never called her as a witness despite records of her police interview corroborating Adnan's alibi. On top of that, there was Adnan himself. There was nothing in his history to indicate a predisposition for violence. In fact, he was known to be a respectful straight-A student who seemed to be well-liked by his schoolmates. Sure, he had begun experimenting with pushing boundaries of his conservative home life by trying alcohol and weed and starting relationships with women like Hae. But that didn't mean he was a bad guy. During his trial, the prosecution went to great lengths to demonstrate that Hae separating from Adnan was his motive for murder. They asked him about a particular incident just a few weeks before her death, in which his parents had found out he was going to the homecoming dance with Hae, and his mother had turned up and chastised him in front of everyone. They framed this as a moment where Adnan looked down at Hae and thought, "Look what you're doing to our family." Jay's testimony, on the other hand, painted Adnan as a crazed psychopath who had forced him to help with disposing of Hae's body. Otherwise, he would tell police about Jay's drug dealing. Despite the purely circumstantial case against Adnan, on February 25th, 2000, almost exactly 1 year since Hae's body was found, Adnan Syed was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison plus 30 years. The following is a timeline of Adnan's subsequent appeals and motions as he tried to demonstrate that his defense was inadequate and that he was innocent. 3 years after his initial trial, Adnan appealed his conviction. But even with a new defense lawyer, this appeal was unsuccessful. In 2010, he made a further appeal for post-conviction relief, this time based on ineffective assistance of counsel. He claimed that his defense lawyer, Cristina Gutierrez, had failed to provide adequate counsel due to her failure to investigate the claims of his alibi witness, Asia McClain. But the judge ruled that Cristina Gutierrez had intentionally avoided involving Asia. The judge said that this was a part of her strategy rather than any act of incompetence, as would be required to assert such an appeal. Therefore, Adnan's claim was again denied. In 2015, the Maryland Court of Special Appeals approved an application from Adnan's team to apply for permission to appeal for a hearing on the admissibility of Asia McClain's alibi testimony. Soon after this application, they made a second motion to demonstrate that the cell phone tower record evidence, which was heavily relied on in Adnan's trial, was misleading and therefore should not have been used against him. They found a notice on the phone records used in the case stating that the billing locations for incoming calls would, quote, not be considered reliable information for location. These two applications were successful. And in November 2015, the post-conviction relief hearing heard testimony directly from Asia McClain about her interactions with Adnan in the library on the day that Hae was murdered. But it took until June 30th, 2016, for Adnan's conviction to be vacated and a new trial to be ordered. In his remarks, the judge who ruled in Adnan's favor commented that Christina Gutierrez had rendered ineffective assistance when she failed to cross-examine the state's expert regarding the reliability of cell phone tower location evidence. Adnan was then denied bail while he awaited his new trial. The prosecutor's office appealed this ruling and asserted that Asia McClain's testimony would not have changed the outcome of the trial. But Adnan's request for a retrial was upheld.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Every year, as we say goodbye to the past 12 months and hello to the new year, we promise ourselves and loved ones that at the start of the new year, it's finally time to meet that goal or start the business you've been dreaming about. Then time gets the best of us and we tell ourselves next year. Don't let that happen this time around. Make January 2026 the year you finally start the business you've been dreaming of with our trusted sponsor, Shopify. Shopify gives you everything you need to sell online and in person. Millions of entrepreneurs have already made this leap, from household names to first-time business owners just getting started. Shopify gives you all the tools to easily build your dream store. Choose from hundreds of beautiful templates that you can customize to match your brand. Setup is fast and easy with Shopify's built-in AI tools that write product descriptions and headlines and help you edit product photos. Marketing is built in too. Create email and social campaigns that reach customers wherever they scroll. As you grow, Shopify grows with you. Handle more orders, expand to new markets, and do it all from the same dashboard. In 2026, stop waiting and start selling with Shopify. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/murderdiaries. Go to shopify.com/murderdiaries. That's shopify.com/murderdiaries. Hear your first this new year with Shopify by your side. Yet the prosecutors refused to back down. In 2018, they appealed to the Maryland Court of Appeals. In 2019, now 20 years since Hae's murder, the Court of Appeals overturned the decision of the lower courts, meaning Adnan's request for a new trial was denied. The court agreed Adnan's defense was deficient, but they believed that the new evidence he presented on appeal wouldn't have been enough to change the decision of the jury. They stated, quote, "It does little more than call into question the time that the state claimed Ms. Lee was killed and does nothing to rebut the evidence establishing Mr. Syed's motive and opportunity to kill Ms. Lee." They also ruled that the opportunity to re-examine the validity of the cell phone tower evidence had passed due to it not being raised during the initial petition. In a last-ditch attempt to secure a new trial, Adnan appealed to the Supreme Court of the United States. In November 2019, they also rejected Adnan's appeal for a new trial, this time stating the evidence linking Syed to Lee's death is overwhelming. We remain confident in the verdict that was delivered by the jury and are pleased that justice for Hae Min Lee has been done. After spending 23 years in jail for a crime Adnan claims not to have committed, it seemed all hope to appeal his conviction was lost. But the flame was reignited in March 2022, when in an abrupt change of direction, the Baltimore City State Attorney signed a motion to request the court-ordered DNA testing to be redone on Hae's clothing, shoes, and rape kit. Inexplicably, these items had never been tested for DNA. On the 15th of September 2022, Baltimore prosecutors filed a motion to vacate Adnan's conviction, stating that they had discovered new data which had undermined the original evidence which had been used by prosecutors to convict him. This motion came with the following statement from Assistant State Attorney Becky Feldman. I understand how difficult this is, but we need to make sure we hold the correct person accountable. The motion filed today supports a new trial for Syed based on a nearly year-long investigation that revealed undisclosed and newly developed information regarding 2 alternative suspects, as well as unreliable cell phone tower data. We believe that keeping Mr. Syed detained as we continue to investigate the case with everything that we know now, when we don't have confidence in the results of the first trial, would be unjust. Given the stunning lack of reliable evidence implicating Mr. Syed, coupled with increasing evidence pointing to other suspects, this unjust conviction cannot stand. Just 4 days after filing that motion, a judge vacated Adnan's conviction, and he was released from prison after serving 23 years. Adnan was just 18 years old when he was sent to prison. He's now 41. Although he did not give a statement after being released, his lawyer described his reaction to being released. Quote, he said he couldn't believe it's real. In October 2022, this month, Baltimore prosecutors provided more information about the 2 new potential suspects in Hae Min Lee's murder. Whilst they have declined to publicly identify the suspects, they claim one is known to authorities and had made threats against Hae in the months before her death. In a strange twist, they also stated the man had close ties to Adnan Syed. Public interest in the case has been widespread thanks in part to the publicization of Adnan and Hae's stories in a 2014 podcast named Serial. You might have listened to it. The podcast was downloaded millions of times, and it resulted in Adnan's story being made into an HBO 4-part documentary called The Case Against Adnan Syed. The HBO special aired in 2019 and revealed that Adnan had turned down a plea deal. This plea deal would have reduced his sentence if he had pled guilty, as a plea deal often does. The documentary also revealed that Jay Wilds, whose testimony was the cornerstone of the prosecution's case against Adnan, claimed police had coached him on the testimony he was going to provide during the trial. He also asserted that police told him the location of the Best Buy parking lot was supposed to be used in his testimony as it matched with the cell phone data records from Adnan's phone. He also asserted that police told him the location of the Best Buy parking lot was to be used in the testimony as it matched with the cell phone records from Adnan's phone. Along with presenting new evidence, the podcast and HBO special galvanized interest in the case and led to thousands of posts in online forums theorizing who was actually to blame for Hae's murder. With the announcement of 2 new potential suspects and new evidence, the forums have kicked into overdrive as commenters try to identify the men and predict the outcome of any new investigation. Now, here's a little bit about the new suspects. The first name to come up on the forums is that of the man who found Hae's body, Alonzo Sellers. Alonzo was a janitor, and he told police that he found Hae's body after he'd been driving while drinking a 22-ounce Budweiser. He was on his way back to the school where he worked when he realized he needed to urinate. He pulled off to the side of the road to go to the bathroom in a wooded area of Leakin Park. His statement is the following: I had to go to the bathroom, so I pulled over and I went further in the woods so no one could see me. I walked around through the bushes and everything, and I got back that way, and I was getting ready to urinate when I looked down, and I seen something that looked like hair, something that was covered by the dirt. And I looked real good again, and that's when I seen what looked like a foot. It's not his version of events that people are questioning, though. It's his history. Alonzo has a concerning criminal past. He was allegedly a known streaker with several indecent exposure charges, including one in 1994 for allegedly running naked in a residential neighborhood, and another in 1996 after he was allegedly spotted in a hoodie, white sneakers, sunglasses, and nothing else, so no pants. He ran from police and jumped chain link fences in that incident. Not long before Hae was murdered, he also allegedly stood naked in front of a uniformed police officer who was sitting in her car. What's more is he lived just 5 minutes walk from Woodlawn High School. According to the initial investigation, Alonzo was considered a suspect until he passed a polygraph. I also want to note, it's not confirmed if he's one of the new suspects. Again, this is all from what the forums are talking about. A confirmed, newly revealed piece of evidence is a handwritten note found in Hae's original prosecutor's file. It's believed one of the new suspects is the author of the note, in which this person makes threats against Hae in the months before her death. The note made specific threats that the author was going to kill Hae and make her disappear. The note was a critical component of the motion to overturn Adnan's murder conviction. But why wasn't the note or the author identified earlier? The Baltimore prosecutor's office stated that Adnan's original defense attorney wasn't aware of the existence of the note, but we now know she was certainly aware of the existence of the author. In fact, Cristina Gutierrez, his original defense attorney, represented the author when he was called to testify before the grand jury in Hae's homicide. Also, Christina's firm had represented this man during his divorce. During those proceedings, it was revealed that he had been caught in a sexual situation with a minor from the mosque which Adnan also attended. The man in question was 27 at the time of the incident, where he was found in the back of his van with his pants down next to a 14-year-old boy. The man admitted to officers that he had engaged in sexual conduct with the boy. He was arrested, but he escaped facing any charges. At the time of his arrest, he was carrying a picture of Adnan in his pocket. This man was called before the grand jury in Adnan's case, but was never called to testify during the trial. At this time, he's currently serving 16 years in prison for a series of unrelated sex crimes. Those sex crimes occurred between 2010 and 2014 in Washington, D.C., which was where the man was working as a qualified medical professional. All the victims were male and were patients of his. Every one of them had been administered anesthesia before being assaulted. It's believed that this man and Adnan were close because they attended the same mosque at the same time. It's been reported that he counseled Adnan in regards to the Quran's views of relationships between two men and personally mentored him as an honor student. He was also the person who helped Adnan hire Cristina Gutierrez as his attorney after he was charged with the murder. He also co-signed a cell phone contract with Adnan. There's a lot going on here. Why Cristina Gutierrez didn't use any of this information as part of Adnan's defense will never be known because she passed away in 2004. We do know that Cristina was aware of this man's arrest, though, because in the original incident, the lead city prosecutor called her the day of the arrest, and he was listed as a potential witness in the trial. It's clear, though, that Cristina Gutierrez, representing both Adnan and this unnamed suspect, presented a conflict of interest, which may have had a bearing on her ability to provide adequate counsel during his trial. The prosecutor's office themselves felt that Cristina Gutierrez's representation of both the accused and this witness presented a conflict of interest at the time of the initial trial, and they sought to disqualify her from being able to represent Adnan. However, this new suspect and Adnan weren't worried about this. They wrote to the judge to state that they weren't concerned about a conflict of interest at all, and the motion to exclude Cristina Gutierrez from representing Adnan was denied. And that was that. Baltimore prosecutors also note that this suspect, quote, engaged in aggressive violent acts towards a woman known to him and forcibly confined her. It was also alleged that this suspect made threats against the life of this person. These events happened prior to the trial in this case, end quote. This quote is referring to allegations from the man's ex-wife, which were revealed in court findings for their divorce. In the documents, the man's ex-wife says he was cruel and excessively vicious throughout their marriage. She also alleged that he attacked her with a knife twice, forcibly confined her to their home, and made threats against her life and the lives of her family members. The woman filed for divorce after a private investigator she hired to look into her husband's activity found the man in the back of the van with that 14-year-old boy we mentioned earlier. Is this the man who so callously killed 18-year-old Hae Min Lee and then framed his mentoree Adnan, causing him to spend 23 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit? We have to wonder. I want to take us back now to Jay Wilde's testimony. While no official statement has been made about the inconsistency of the testimony, which formed the spine, basically, of the original case against Adnan, Jay has been interviewed over the years since the trial. It's worth noting, though, that he declined to be involved in both the Serial podcast and the HBO series. At one point, he spoke to a reporter and he said, "I wasn't openly willing to cooperate with the police. It wasn't until they made it clear that they weren't interested in my procurement of pot that I began to open up any. And then I would only give them information pertaining to my interaction with someone or where I was. They had to chase me around before they could corner me and talk to me. And there came a point where I was just sick of talking to them. And they wouldn't stop interviewing me or questioning me. I wasn't fully cooperating. So if they said, well, we have phone records that you talked to Jen, I'd say, nope, I didn't talk to Jen. Until Jen told me that she talked with the cops and that it was okay if I did too. I stonewalled them that way. No, until they told me they weren't trying to prosecute me for selling weed or trying to get any of my friends in trouble. People had lives and they were trying to get into college and stuff like that. Getting them in trouble for anything that they knew or that I had told them, I couldn't have that. I want to bring us back to the fact that the DNA is being retested. This is possibly going to be presenting new DNA evidence in this case. And moreover, if this DNA were to match one of the new suspects, Adnan's old mentor, they're going to get a match. He's currently incarcerated, so surely his DNA is on file and they'll get a hit for a match. The Baltimore State Attorney says that if the DNA comes back inconclusive, I will certify that he's innocent. If it comes back to 2 alternative suspects, I will certify that he's innocent. If it comes back to Adnan Syed, the state is still in a position to proceed upon a prosecution. As we know, Adnan is no longer in jail on his own recognizance. He's currently in home detention and being GPS monitored. The prosecutor's office was given 30 days to decide whether they wanted to seek a new trial or dismiss the case, and that date was set to expire on Thursday, October 26th, 2022. Prosecutors didn't take all 30 days, though. On October 11th, 2022, prosecutors dropped all charges against Adnan Syed. In the bustle of all this media and online commentary about this case, the people who appeared to have the least coverage or consideration are the family of Hae Min Lee, the family who have only memories of their joyful, smiley daughter. Surely there's no trauma akin to losing a child to murder, and then to have the circumstances of that murder be replayed and relitigated for more than 23 years, it must have been unending anguish. Over the years, Hae's family have declined to be involved in the podcast or the HBO special about their daughter's murder. In various statements after Adnan's successful appeal for a new trial, they stated that the podcast reopened wounds that few can imagine. It remains hard to see so many run to defend someone who committed a horrible crime, who destroyed our family, who refuses to accept responsibility when so few are willing to speak up for Hae. Unlike those who learned about this case on the internet, we sat and watched every day of both trials. So many witnesses, so much evidence. Hae's younger brother comments, "This is not a podcast for me. This is real life, a never-ending nightmare for 20 plus years." Hae Min Lee's family is attempting to appeal the overturning of Adnan's convictions, stating that they believe he is the killer. On October 12, 2022, Maryland's Court of Special Appeals gave Hae Min Lee's family 15 days to explain in writing why their appeal for the overturning of Adnan's convictions should continue. While the details of Hae's murder and the subsequent investigation, trials, and appeals have become headline news, very little has been written about Hae herself. So we want to end this episode in memory of her, the original victim of this horrendous crime, a woman who will be forever 18. Hae wrote in her diary regularly, recalling simple moments of joy in her life, like winning a lacrosse game or achieving a good grade in school. In one particular entry where Hae was writing about her excitement for the upcoming homecoming dance, she wrote the following quote, "Do love and remember me forever."
That's it for this week's episode, but be sure to check us out on Mondays for unscripted celebrity deep dives, Tuesdays for documentary discussions, and on Thursdays for our true crime case coverage. You can also find us on social media at the Murder Diaries Pod. We're everywhere: TikTok, Instagram, even YouTube. Until then,
Stay safe.
bye.